My sister looked me dead in the eye, holding up the dress she'd just ruined, and said, "Cry or leave. Those are your two options today." I want you to sit with that for a second, because I did. I stood there in a bathroom the size of a closet in my underwear, 20 minutes before I was supposed to walk down an aisle, and my own sister told me those were my options. Cry or leave my own wedding. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name's Renee. I'm 31 now. This happened when I was 28, and honestly, 3 years later, I still catch myself mid-sentence sometimes, telling this story to someone new, and I stop and go, wait, did that actually happen? Did my sister actually do that? And then I remember, yeah, she did. There's photo evidence. There's a group chat full of relatives who saw it happen in real time. It happened. So, my sister, Dina, 2 years older than me. Growing up, if you'd asked anyone in our town who the special one was, they'd have said Dina without blinking. And look, I'm not saying that with bitterness, or I'm trying not to. She was genuinely the kind of kid teachers loved. Valedictorian. Piano recitals where she'd forget a whole section and just improvise something that sounded intentional. My mom used to say Dina could fall into a lake and come out dry. That was the joke in our house. And I was fine with that, mostly. I was the quiet one. I liked drawing, I liked being left alone with a book, I wasn't chasing anybody's approval, or okay, that's not totally true. I probably was a little. You don't grow up in a house where one kid gets called our little star at every dinner party without absorbing something about where you rank. Here's a detail I still think about. My mom had this habit. Whenever Dina did anything, even something small, Mom would say, of course, like it was inevitable. Dina got into her top choice college, of course. Dina got the lead in the community theater thing. Of course, look at her. When I got into my program for graphic design, my dad said, good for you, Renee, which is nice, don't get me wrong, but of course, and good for you land really differently when you're 17 and comparing. Anyway, that's not really what the story is about. That's just, I guess I need you to understand the shape of things before I get into what happened. Because none of it makes sense without that shape. I met Marcus when I was 25. He's an electrician, works with his uncle's company, and I remember the first thing that struck me about him was that he actually finished his sentences. I don't know how to explain that better. Dina's husband at the time, I'll get to him, talked in these grand loops that never landed anywhere. Marcus just said what he meant. It was almost disorienting at first, how simple that was. We dated 3 years before he proposed. And when he did, it was not some elaborate thing. It was in his truck. Actually, we just left a hardware store and he was quiet for a minute and then he just said, I don't want to wait for the perfect moment because I don't think there is one. So, will you marry me? And pulled the ring out of the cup holder. I laughed so hard I almost couldn't say yes. That's very us, I think. Not glamorous. Real. When I told Dina, she hugged me. She cried a little. She said all the right things. I remember thinking, okay, good, we're in a good place. Because things had been weird between us for a couple years by then. She'd gone through her divorce, and I think some part of her resented that my relationship was steady while hers had just publicly imploded. I don't blame her for that, by the way. Divorce is brutal, and hers was messy, and I know what it's like to watch your life fall apart while everyone around you seems to have theirs figured out. I get it. I got it then, too. I just didn't realize how much it was still sitting in her. So the engagement, the year of planning, I want to tell you it was smooth, but it wasn't, not entirely. There were, I'd say, 3 moments before the wedding day itself where I got this small, cold feeling. Like something was off, and I kept explaining it away. First one, cake tasting. Dina came with me and Mom, which I appreciated, I did, but she spent most of the appointment telling the baker how she'd have done her own cake if she were getting married again. This elaborate 5-tier thing with sugar flowers, going into detail nobody asked for. And at the end, when the baker asked me which flavor I wanted for the actual cake, my actual wedding, my actual cake, Dina answered for me. She'll do the vanilla almond, trust me, it's classic. I did like the vanilla almond. That's not the point. The point is she didn't even look at me when she said it. Second one, my dress fitting. I'd picked this dress. Simple, ivory, not much lace, kind of understated, which is very me, and Dina came to that too, and when I came out of the fitting room, she went quiet for a second and then said, brave choice. Just like that. Brave choice. My mom laughed it off, said something like, "Oh, Dina, stop." But I stood there in front of the mirror suddenly seeing every flaw in a dress I'd loved 20 seconds earlier. Third one, and this one I actually confronted her about, sort of. She offered to help with the seating chart, and when I got the draft back, she'd sat Marcus's entire extended family at the far back tables, near the bathroom, and put her own friend group at the tables closest to the head table. When I asked her about it, she said, "I just thought it'd flow better this way," and when I pushed a little more, she got that tight smile she does, you know, the one that doesn't move her eyes at all, and said, "Wow. Okay. I'm just trying to help, and this is the thanks I get." So I dropped it. I redid the chart myself later, quietly, and didn't bring it up again. I told myself, it's fine. She's had a hard couple years. Weddings bring stuff up for people, it's fine. I actually said the words, "it's fine," to Marcus so many times that year that he started saying it back to me sarcastically, just to make me laugh. "It's fine, Renee." It became a whole thing between us. I should mention my mom's role in all this, because it matters for what comes later.
My mom is not a bad person. I want to be really clear about that.
But my mom has spent 30 years managing Dina's moods the way you'd manage a smoke detector that goes off if you cook anything, very carefully, very preemptively, tiptoeing around triggering it. So whenever there was tension between me and Dina, my mom's instinct wasn't ever really to look at what happened. It was just, how do we get Dina calm again? I didn't fully clock how deep that instinct ran until the actual wedding day. I'm getting there, I promise. Okay.
So,
the morning of the wedding. We were getting ready at this bed and breakfast about 40 minutes from the venue, small, kind of old-fashioned, 3 rooms upstairs where the bridal party could get dressed. My dress had been hanging in the biggest room since the night before, this beautiful old sunlit room with a bay window, and I remember walking past it the night before and just looking at it hanging there and feeling, genuinely, so happy. Like, stomach fluttery happy. I hadn't felt that uncomplicated in months, with all the planning stress. Morning of, hair and makeup people arrive around 8. We've got mimosas nobody's really drinking. Dina is there in her maid of honor robe looking, I'll admit, stunning. She always photographs like she was born for it. And everything's actually going fine for a couple hours. Genuinely fine. I remember thinking, maybe I was overreacting about the whole year. Maybe today's just going to be good. And then around 10:30, I go to get into the dress. I want to describe this slowly because I've replayed it in my head so many times I could probably draw you a diagram. I unzip the garment bag. And the dress inside, it's not right. At first I don't even understand what I'm looking at because it is my dress, same silhouette, same ivory color even, but the neckline's different. It's been altered. There's a slit up the side that was never there, and there's this large, obvious stain, brownish, coffee maybe, right across the front panel, already dried in. I actually laughed the first 3 seconds, genuinely laughed out of confusion, like, this isn't my dress, this is a joke, someone's playing a joke on me. And then I looked closer and realized it was my dress. Altered. Ruined. I said, I don't even remember exactly what I said, something like, "What happened? What is this?" loud enough that a couple of the bridesmaids came in. And that's when Dina walked in from the bathroom, already in her robe, her makeup half done, and looked at the dress and looked at me, and I swear to you her face did this thing, this small flicker, there and gone, that I only fully understood weeks later. In the moment I just thought she looked shocked, like the rest of us. "Oh my God," she said. "What happened?" And I said, "I don't know, I don't understand. It was fine last night." And one of the bridesmaids, Priya, said quietly, "Wasn't Dina on here last night? I saw you go up around midnight, Dee." And Dina's face did the flicker again. Smaller this time. And she said, "Too fast. I was just checking on it. Making sure it was okay for today." I remember my stomach dropping right then. Not because I'd figured it out yet, I hadn't, not fully, but because something in how fast she said that didn't match how confused she was acting 3 seconds earlier. That's when my mom came in, saw the dress, saw my face, and went straight into crisis management mode. Except the crisis she was managing was not the one you'd expect. "Okay," she said, hands up like she was calming a room. "Okay, let's not panic. Let's not make this bigger than it is." Bigger than it is. My wedding dress. 40 minutes before hair and makeup finish. Ruined. I said, "Mom, "This is my dress, my actual dress. I don't have a backup." And that's when Dina, and I need you to picture this, her half in her robe, mascara half done on one eye, holding the ruined dress up in front of her like she's showing it off, looked at me and said the line. The one I opened this whole story with. Cry or leave. Those are your two options today. I actually didn't understand it as an insult at first. I thought, genuinely, for one confused second, that she meant it kindly, like, you can cry it out or we leave it behind and move forward. Some weird attempt at comfort. It took me a beat to hear the tone. The tone was not comfort. The tone was almost satisfied. Like she'd been waiting to say something like that for a while and finally had the excuse. I didn't say anything back. I want to be honest about that because in the version of this story I used to tell people, I made myself sound sharper in the moment than I actually was. The truth is, I just stood there. My hands went cold, actually cold. I remember rubbing them together without thinking about it. I couldn't get words out. Priya, bless her, was the one who spoke. She said, "Dina, that's an insane thing to say right now." And Dina spun on her, actual venom in her voice. "I'm trying to help. Why is everyone acting like I did something wrong? I just found it like this." Found it like this. 12 hours after Priya saw her go into that room alone at midnight. My mom, meanwhile, was already on the phone, not calling anyone about a backup dress, not calling the venue. She was calling my aunt, asking her to bring something Dina could wear if this gets worse, which I did not understand in the moment and which made me feel, for reasons I couldn't articulate yet, like the ground was tilting under a floor I thought was solid. I want to pause here, actually, and back up for 1 second, because there's a detail from months earlier that suddenly made a horrible kind of sense to me, standing in that room. A few weeks before the wedding, Dina had asked me, almost offhand, over dinner, what would happen, hypothetically, if something happened to the dress day of. Like, was there a backup plan? I remember laughing and saying, "Nothing's going to happen to it. It's hanging in a garment bag," and she'd shrugged and said, "Just wondering. Weddings are chaos. Anything can happen." I didn't think about that conversation again until I was standing in that sunlit room looking at a stained, altered dress with 40 minutes to spare. Marcus texted me right around then. He was getting ready at his own place. No idea any of this was happening, just a normal text, something like, "Counting down, love you." And I remember staring at my phone and not being able to type anything back for a solid 2 minutes, because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Here's the thing, though. Here's the part one didn't know yet. Standing in that room, holding a ruined dress, my sister telling me to cry or leave my own wedding. The stain wasn't the only thing that had happened that night. And it wasn't even close to the worst thing Dina had done in the 12 hours before my wedding. Because about 40 minutes later, when one of the hairstylists went out to her car to grab a curling iron she'd forgotten, she came back in holding her phone up, face white, and said, "Renee, you need to see something. Somebody just texted this to half the wedding group chat." The stylist turned her phone around, and there it was. A photo, sent to a group chat that had, I counted later, 41 members, including my future mother-in-law, including 2 of my aunts, including Marcus's 12-year-old niece, who definitely should not have been on a wedding logistics chat, but somehow was, because nobody ever removes anyone from these things.
The photo was of me.
Except not really me. It was a photo from years earlier, my early 20s at a party, mid-laugh, drink in hand, looking a little sloppy, a little too much fun in a way that's completely normal and completely harmless out of context, and completely damning with the caption Dina had added underneath it. The caption said, "Hope she's more put together than this today, lol. Some people never grow up." Praying for Marcus, honestly. I want to explain something about why this hit different than the dress. The dress, I could rationalize even in the moment. Accidents happen, coffee spills, fabric tears, sure, fine, unlikely but fine. This was calculated. This required her to go find an old photo of me, from years back, write a caption designed to make me look unstable and immature on my own wedding morning, and send it to a chat that included my future in-laws. There's no version of that's an accident. I actually didn't say anything for a second. I just took the phone from the stylist and stared at it. And I remember, this is such a specific, dumb detail, but I remember exactly what I was wearing, this oversized flannel shirt of Marcus's I always stole to get ready in, and I remember pulling the sleeves down over my hands, This thing I do when I'm trying to hold myself together and just standing there. My mom came over, looked at the phone, and her face, I'll never forget this. Her face didn't do shock. It did something closer to tired. Like this was a familiar weather pattern to her. Like, oh, this again. Dina, my mom called out, not even that loud, more resigned than angry. Did you send this? And Dina, who'd been pretending to fix her makeup at the mirror this whole time, very obviously listening, turned around and said, send what? Just flat denial. Straight-faced. And I remember something in me went very calm and very cold at the same time, this weird combination, and I said, Dina, your name is right there. It says it was sent from your number. She looked at the phone the stylist was holding, and there was this pause, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3, where I watched her actually deciding in real time which lie to commit to. And she landed on, okay, fine, I sent it, but I meant it as a joke, obviously. Why is everyone being so sensitive today? It's just a funny old photo. A funny old photo, with a caption about praying for my husband. Sent 40 minutes before the ceremony. Priya, and I need to give Priya so much credit in this story. She basically became my only steady thing that whole morning. Priya said, very quietly but very clearly, Dina, I think you need to leave the room. And Dina rounded on her. This is where I finally saw something I think had been sitting under the surface our entire lives, finally coming up for air. She said, and I'm going to get this as close to exact as I can because it's burned into me, she said. You know what? Everyone's acting like I'm the villain here, but has anyone ever once considered that maybe I'm allowed to have a bad day too? Renee gets her perfect wedding, her perfect dress, her perfect guy who actually stayed, and I'm supposed to just smile and clap? I've spent 2 years watching everyone fawn over this wedding while my whole life fell apart, and nobody checked on me the way they're checking on her right now over a stain. The room went quiet. I remember the hum of the curling iron someone had left plugged in. That's the only sound I remember, this stupid little detail, the curling iron humming on the counter.
And here's the thing.
Even in that moment, furious, shaking, holding a ruined dress, and a phone full of a cruel caption, some old, worn-down part of me almost felt bad for her. That's the messed up thing about growing up the way we did. Even when she was actively sabotaging my wedding, some reflex in me wanted to comfort her. I actually opened my mouth to say something like, I know this year's been hard for you. I swear I almost said it. And then I caught myself, because what was I doing? Apologizing to her on the morning she ruined my dress and humiliated me to 41 people? My mom, to her credit, and I want to be fair here because she did eventually do the right thing, just way later than she should have. My mom looked at Dina and said, this isn't the time. We can talk about your feelings later. Right now we need to fix this dress situation and Renee needs to get ready. Not Dina. That was cruel. Not Dina, apologize. Just, we'll deal with your feelings later, but first, logistics. I remember hearing that and thinking, so that's it, that's the family script. That's always been the family script. Dina's feelings get scheduled discussion time. My ruined wedding morning gets triaged like a delay at the DMV. I want to back up here for a second, actually, because I skipped something. About 20 minutes before all this, before the stylist found the photo, I'd asked Dina directly, did you do something to the dress? I asked it kind of gently, actually, giving her an out because some part of me still wanted there to be an innocent explanation. And she'd looked me right in the eye and said, Renee, why would I do that to you? That's insane. I love you. I love you. She said that to me 20 minutes before the photo surfaced. I keep coming back to that because it's the detail that actually broke something in me, more than the stain, more than the caption. Not the sabotage itself, but the ease of the lie right before it. How smoothly "I love you" came out of her mouth while she was holding the exact stained dress she'd altered the night before.
Okay, so
we had, at this point, maybe 35 minutes before we needed to leave for the venue. My aunt, my mom's sister, Aunt Ruth, who is, I love her, an absolute force of nature, arrived with a garment bag. Turns out my mom had called her earlier not for me, like I said, but because Ruth apparently kept an old dress of hers from her own second wedding just in case. Which, again, in the moment I didn't understand why this was relevant, until I realized, with this sick lurch in my stomach, that my mother's backup plan, in a genuine emergency, was to hand me a dress that wasn't even mine, wasn't even my style. A dress with big puffy sleeves from 1990-something because getting me into anything, apparently, mattered more than getting me into something I'd actually feel like myself in. I said no. I remember saying it firmly, which surprised even me because up until that point I'd basically been in shock, just absorbing blow after blow. But something about being handed my aunt's decades-old prom-looking dress as the solution snapped something back into place in me. I said, "I'm not wearing that. I need my dress. Someone needs to actually try to fix my dress or find an alternative, not just hand me whatever's closest." This is where Priya, again, saved the day. She remembered that the seamstress who'd done my original alterations had a shop maybe 25 minutes away, and she was already calling before I even finished my sentence, explaining the emergency, practically begging. And here's a small piece of luck in all this. The seamstress, an older woman named Corinne, who I'd only met twice during fittings, happened to be at her shop that morning doing paperwork, and she said, if we could get the dress there in the next 15 minutes, she'd see what she could do. No promises, but she'd try. So now we're in a full-blown race. Priya driving, me in the passenger seat still half in Marcus's flannel shirt, the ruined dress in a garment bag in my lap, my hands actually shaking on the fabric the whole ride. I remember staring out the window, not really seeing anything, just replaying "cry or leave" over and over, that phrase looping like something stuck in a scratched record. We got to Corinne's shop with, I'm not exaggerating, 9 minutes to spare on what she said she needed. She took one look at the dress, this grim, focused expression, and said, "The stain's not coming out in time, but I can cut the panel down, work the slit into an intentional design line instead of a flaw. We can save the shape of it. It won't be exactly what it was, but it'll be yours, and it'll look intentional." I started crying right then. First time all morning, actually, which is funny, given what my sister told me my only two options were. Not from the stain, not from the caption. From this stranger, this seamstress I barely knew, working with actual focus and care to save something my own sister had tried to destroy. She worked fast, genuinely fast, hands moving like she'd done emergency alterations 100 times, which maybe she had, and in about 25 minutes she'd cut the stained panel away entirely, restructured the front, turned what had been vandalism into something that, if you didn't know, looked like an intentional asymmetrical design choice. It wasn't the dress I'd picked out, but it was close enough, and it was still, unmistakably, mine, saved instead of replaced. We got back to the venue with almost no time left. Hair needed a quick fix. My makeup had smudged slightly from the crying, but we made it. Marcus, waiting at the front, had absolutely no idea any of this had happened. My mom had specifically asked everyone not to tell him, so it doesn't ruin his day, which, even writing it now, still makes something in my chest tighten a little, the idea that protecting his day mattered enough to organize around, but protecting mine, apparently, hadn't. Dina, for her part, had smoothed everything over by the time we got to the venue. Makeup fixed, robe changed into her bridesmaid dress, greeting people at the door like absolutely nothing had happened, laughing with my future mother-in-law, who, and this is the part that made my stomach drop the most, had clearly seen the group chat photo because I caught her giving me the small, searching look as I walked in, the kind of look that says I saw something and I don't know what to make of it. The ceremony itself, weirdly, went fine. I walked down the aisle. I said my vows. Marcus cried a little, which he never does, and for those 10 minutes standing across from him, I actually forgot about the morning entirely. That part was real. I want to be clear about that. Whatever happened around it, marrying Marcus was real and good and mine. It was at the reception where it all detonated again. Because during the toasts, Dina stood up, glass in hand, and gave what started as this genuinely warm, funny maid of honor speech, stories about us as kids, a joke about my terrible taste in shoes, the crowd laughing, and I remember actually relaxing, thinking, okay, maybe this is her trying to make it right, in her own way, through this speech. And then, near the end, she said, glass raised, voice pitched perfectly for the whole room to hear. And I just want to say, Renee, I know today wasn't exactly smooth. Little hiccups here and there. But hey, that's what happens when you rush into things without really planning, right? Anyway, to the happy couple, however this goes. The room went quiet in that specific way a room goes quiet when everyone felt something land wrong, but nobody wants to be the first to react. Marcus's hand found mine under the table, gripping it, and I remember him leaning over and whispering, "What is she talking about?" And me not being able to answer him, because how do you explain, in a whisper, at your own wedding, in front of 200 people, everything that had happened that morning? I looked over at my mom. She was staring at her plate. Not at Dina. Not at me. Her plate. And that's when Priya, steady, furious Priya, who'd been holding all of this in since 8 that morning, stood up from her seat at our table, phone in hand, and said, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear, "Actually, I think people should know exactly what kind of hiccups Dina is talking about." Priya stood there, phone in hand, and the first thing she did was hold it up, screen facing the room as much as a single phone screen can face a room of 200 people, and say, "This was sent to the wedding group chat this morning. From Dina's number. About Renee." She didn't even read the caption out loud. Actually, that's a detail I think about a lot, how she didn't need to escalate it further than showing it existed. She just said, "Ask her what it says if you want to know why today wasn't smooth." Dina's face, I watched it happen in real time, went through about 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion first, like she genuinely couldn't compute that this was happening in front of everyone. Then this flash of anger, jaw tightening. And then, weirdly, something almost like a smile, this brittle, performative thing, like she was trying to signal to the room, "Oh, this is silly, don't worry about this." "Priya, can we not do this right now?" she said, forcing a laugh that landed on absolutely nobody. But it was too late because people were already pulling out their own phones. And I didn't know this until later, a bunch of people on that group chat had already seen the photo that morning and just hadn't said anything, out of the same instinct my mom had, don't make a scene, deal with it later, protect the day. Except now the scene was finding itself, with or without anyone's permission. My future mother-in-law, Carol, stood up from her table. Carol is this soft-spoken woman who I'd maybe heard raise her voice once, at a football game, and she said clearly to the room, "I got that text this morning too." I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to cause a problem on Renee's day. But since we're apparently talking about it now, that was an incredibly cruel thing to send someone on her wedding morning. And then it just unraveled, is the only word I have for it. Not in a chaotic, screaming way, actually. Almost worse than that. In this slow, horrible, controlled way, where one by one, quietly, people started saying what they'd seen or heard that morning. Someone else at the bridal party table mentioned the dress. Someone mentioned overhearing cry or leave. My Aunt Ruth, who apparently does not do quiet even when everyone else is doing quiet, said loudly enough for the back tables to hear. She ruined the girl's dress and then told her to cry or leave her own wedding. That's what happened. Let's just say it plainly. Dina stood there, glass still in her hand, and I watched her look around the room, at Carol, at Ruth, at the faces slowly shifting from confused to appalled, and I watched her realize, in real time, that the room was not going to do what it had always done for her. It was not going to smooth over, explain it away, decide her feelings mattered more than the facts in front of everyone. For maybe the first time in her whole life, the room was choosing me. She set the glass down a little too hard, it clinked against the plate, and said, voice cracking now, less performance in it, "You're all seriously going to do this? At her wedding? Make me the villain in front of everyone." And here's the part one actually didn't expect for myself. I stood up. I hadn't planned to say anything. I'd spent the whole morning being talked over, managed, handed solutions I hadn't asked for, told to fix my face and move on. But something about watching her still try to make herself the wrong party, even now, even with the evidence sitting in 41 phones, made something in me finally just speak. I said, and I'm doing my best to remember this exactly, I said, "Dina, nobody's making you the villain. You did that this morning on your own, twice. Once with the dress, and once with the photo. I didn't send that caption. I didn't cut my own dress. I have spent my whole life making room for how hard things have been for you, and I understand this year was hard, I really do. But today was supposed to be one day. One day where I got to just be happy, and you couldn't give me that. You couldn't even give me that." The room was so quiet I could hear the string quartet's cellist, who I think didn't fully realize what was happening, still faintly tuning in the corner. Dina didn't say anything for a second. And this actually surprised me more than anything else that whole day, she started crying. Not performance crying. Real, ugly, ragged crying, the kind where your breath catches. I know, she said. I know, okay? I don't know why I did it. I saw the dress hanging there the night before, and I felt something so ugly come up in me and I didn't stop it, and then this morning I panicked, and I don't even fully understand why I sent that photo except that some sick part of me wanted people to see the way I felt. Not put together.
Not fine.
Because I wasn't, and it felt unbearable that you got to be. I want to be honest, I didn't hug her in that moment. I know in some versions of this kind of story, that's the beat, the villain breaks down, and everyone reconciles right there at the reception. That's not what happened. I just looked at her and said, quietly, that's not an excuse, Dina. That's an explanation. Those aren't the same thing. And I sat back down. Marcus put his arm around me. And the room, slowly, awkwardly moved on. The DJ, bless him, had the good sense to cue up a song right about then, and people drifted back into conversation, into dancing, in that specific way crowds do when they collectively decide to let something breathe instead of picking at it further. Dina left the reception about 20 minutes later. Nobody stopped her. I'll tell you what happened in the weeks after because I think that's actually the part people want to know, more than the reception scene itself. My mom called me the next day, and for the first time in maybe my entire life, she didn't lead with, let's not make this bigger than it is. She led with, I should have said something the moment I saw that dress. I was so used to managing Dina's reactions that I didn't stop to think about what I was asking of you, over and over, for years. I'm sorry, Renee. I really am. That apology mattered to me more than I expected it to. Not because it fixed everything retroactively, it didn't, and I told her that, gently, but because it was the first time someone in my family had named the pattern out loud, instead of just living inside it with me. Dina, and I didn't speak for about 4 months. I want to be honest about that too, because I think sometimes these stories wrap up too neatly, too fast, like a bow gets tied the second the truth comes out, and that's not how real families work. There was no dramatic phone call, where everything got resolved. There was just silence, and both of us, I think, needing that silence. She reached out eventually, a long message, not a text, an actual letter, handwritten, which surprised me because Dina's never been a letter person. She wrote about therapy she'd started, which she hadn't told anyone she was doing. She wrote about the divorce, and how much of her identity had been wrapped up in being the one things worked out for, and how watching my wedding come together while her marriage had fallen apart had cracked something in her that she said she'd been quietly resenting, and resenting herself for resenting, for longer than just that year. She didn't ask me to forgive her in the letter. That's actually what made me take it seriously. She just said she understood if I never wanted her at another family event again and that she'd accept that, but she wanted me to know she finally understood what she'd done, not just that people were mad about it. We're not exactly where we used to be. I want to be honest about that, since I promised myself I'd tell this story straight and not tie it up prettier than it actually is. We talk now, maybe once a month. We went to lunch a few weeks ago, and it was fine. A little careful, getting easier, slowly. She came to Marcus's birthday dinner last month, and it was genuinely nice, in this fragile new way. The dress actually still hangs in my closet, the altered version, the one Corinne saved. I kept it instead of the original design I'd picked out. Marcus asked me once why I didn't try to get it properly redone afterward back to the original, and I told him I actually like it better this way, the asymmetrical line where the stain used to be. It's not the dress I planned, but it's the one that survived, and there's something about that feels more honestly mine than the original ever would have. Here's what I keep coming back to if there's a lesson in any of this. And I don't love wrapping things up in neat little lessons, but I think there's a real one here. For years, I let "she's had it harder" be the reason I made myself smaller, quieter, less inconvenient. And there's a version of compassion that's real and good, and there's a version that's just absorbing damage, so somebody else doesn't have to feel the consequences of their own choices. I'd spent so long confusing those two things. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop loving someone. I still love my sister. I probably always will. In that complicated, tangled way you love the people you grew up sharing a bathroom and a childhood bedroom with. But loving her stopped meaning I had to hand her my own wedding day as one more thing she got to have, even in a small, sabotaged way. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had someone in your life who needed you smaller so they could feel bigger, I'd really love to hear your story in the comments. You're not wrong for finally saying something. Sometimes the room needs you to stand up before it remembers how to choose you too.